Welcome to the Nano podcast. I'm your host, Will Chernlin, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey through the world of nano companies. For the past decade, I've talked to thousands of business owners across various industries. It's been an enlightening experience revealing the vast tapestries of entrepreneurship and innovation that thrives beneath the surface of mainstream media coverage. Each week, I will interview different leaders of nano publicly traded companies to learn about their history, what they do now, and their future. As a reminder, none of this information is financial advice, and it is all for entertainment purposes only. Let's start this week's episode. Hi, everyone. On this week's episode, we have Jarrett Boone, the founder and CEO of Safety Shot, stock ticker SHOT. Safety Shot is a beverage that accelerates the detoxification process, helping individuals feel better after consuming alcohol. Jarrett, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'd love to kind of start with your background. You kind of started with an agency that looks like it sold leads for the vacation industry, and then you pivoted that into being kind of one of the first investors into LifeLock, which is a totally different category. And then you eventually were able to exit, basically, it looks like everything you've ever started. And then now you're into the beverage industry. So tell me a bit more about how you first got into selling vacation leads and how that somehow kind of worked its way into LifeLock.
Yeah, you're kind of dating me a little bit. That was way back in my early days. I owned a sales and marketing company here in Phoenix for about 12 years. We had about 400 employees, and really we focused within the timeshare vertical and worked with the Marriotts of the world, the Disneys of the world, the Hiltons of the world back in the day when that was a popular, sector and vertical. Like I said, I ran that for about 12 years and then exited that and sold it to a publicly traded customer of ours. So that was really exciting. And then really kind of shortly thereafter that was in 2004. I didn't really have too much time to rest. And the LifeLock opportunity came before me. And so I was one of the original three guys that started that company. So I was one of the original thought leaders and investors and led business development there. Like I mentioned, we started that company in 2005, literally on a napkin at a Starbucks at 24th Street in Camelback in Scottsdale. Grew that. We took it public in 2012. And then in 2017, Symantec came in and bought it and took it private again for $2.3 billion. So it was very much, rocket ship growth. Learned a lot. And we knew nothing about identity theft protection when we started that company. But by the time that we got to the end of that, we certainly created a unicorn within the space.
What was the original idea on that Starbucks? That the three of you were sitting there on a napkin and saying what? People's identities are Wild West on online, and they should have some sort of structure and some way to protect it? Or what was the original thesis?
The original, and I'll come full circle with this because it's a very similar story to Safety Shot. And the way that it worked is my partner and I, we actually came across the guy that had the technology for it. But he was, incredibly smart gentleman, needed some help, wasn't necessarily, they were looking to raise some capital, wasn't sure if there was a business there. And so Todd and I, who was the CEO of LifeLock at the time, went through our Rolodex to see who we knew. We vetted it with somebody that was the former vice chairman of the board of Bank of America. And then we vetted it with the former chief technology officer for Visa. And they're like, you guys could really be onto something here. And they're like, well, so much so that we'd be willing to put our names behind it and sit on your board. And so that was kind of the genesis of it. And from that, we bootstrapped it, did friends and family in the beginning. Ultimately, we did, 4 rounds of venture capital, raised about $90 million. Prior to going public in 2012, we, one box that did not check, we didn't have any IP. So we went out and raised another $180 million to acquire a company out of San Diego. And then the rest was history after that. And, we kind of created a category of one. It was the first proactive identity theft protection company that was out there. I think they probably still are today. Everything else was reactionary, or something would happen to your identity. And the credit bureaus were the perceived, competitors in that space that would let you know about that after the fact. We were actually on the front of that. We could help prevent that problem before it ever occurred And of course, we backed that service with $1 million guarantee to say if anything ever occurred to you, we would go fix that problem and that challenge and reimburse you up to $1 million in financial loss.
No, I like the pitch of the $1 million reimbursement. I also like how it ties back into safety shot of you trying to do something preventative ahead of time to prevent a problem down the road. So when did you exactly leave then? Was it somewhere around that after the acquisition where you stuck around for another year and then kind of tried to figure out what business you wanted to run next, or kind of what was that transition like?
Yeah, so I exited about a year after we went public. It was a great opportunity. I think, when I started, there was three of us. And I think when I left, there was like 603 of us, so it grew to be a company that was very different from how we started it. And then shortly after, quite candidly, I took a little bit of a break trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. I sat on some various boards, invested in a motorsports company here in town where we opened up a motorsports country club for car enthusiasts, where we built a track and membership based. And then it was in 2020 that a friend and business partner of mine, who's now the chairman of Safety Shot, John Gulias, came to me and kind of similar to LifeLock, came across somebody who was like, hey, I came across this guy, this scientist guy, really good with beakers and supplements and measuring things, and kind of came up with this idea that we can reduce somebody's blood alcohol content and help sober them up and eliminate the effects of alcohol. And he's like, you think of that? And I'm like, that's very, very interesting. It's similar that it's proactive. It's similar that it's a unicorn within the space. And then, John was really, really passionate about it. And I could hear it in his voice, and he got really emotional about it. And I'm like, look, tell me about that. Tell me about what it is that you're feeling. And he was like, Jarrett, there's a few opportunities that come across in your lifetime that really resonate with you. And this is one of those for me. And here's the reason why. He goes, in my early 20s, he goes, I had two best friends. And we were all meeting up one night. And we were all at three separate locations. And they were coming to meet me at a party. And as my two friends were coming to meet me, they were involved in a drunk driving accident. Each one of them, and they actually each collided with one of them. And one of them was killed on the scene at the time of the accident. And then the other one, shortly thereafter, when I say shortly, like a few months after that, took his own life because of the remorse that he had and everything, felt really responsible for that. And that's something that really sat with John. And so when John met this scientist that came up with the formula, he was like, oh my gosh, like this brings me back 20 years ago when this occurred. Because if I could just save one life, this would be worth it for me. So John was working with that particular scientist for quite some time, and John acquired the rights to the formula and the patent and all of that. But at the time, right before I was getting involved, they were talking to different pharmaceutical companies. They were talking to a big pharma. And the idea was it was a pharmaceutical grade, and the idea was to be able to go into hospitals and to help eliminate alcohol poisoning. While alcohol poisoning is a problem, it's not a big revenue generator for hospitals, to be honest, right? It takes up a bed for somebody that needs to come in for an accident or a triple bypass or something like that. And the idea was to work with hospitals and potentially, police departments across the United States to help get people out of the drunk tank a little bit quicker. But when we were peeling back the business model a little bit, what we realized is, to get FDA compliant for something like that to be able to be within hospitals, it was literally going to cost tens of millions of dollars and multiple years to be able to even get to that point. And that was in 2020. And so then we looked at it, we thought, the bigger addressable market is really to be able to go direct to consumers, because who out there hasn't had one drink too many to where they felt the negative effects of alcohol? And there's nothing out there on the planet that does what we do. So we spent about 3 years re-engineering the beverage and all of the ingredients that were in it, and took out everything that would be more or less deemed pharmaceutical and put in what are called GRAS ingredients, which are generally regarded as safe. And these are ingredients that you would find, most commonly at any beverage or supplement store, high health GNC things like that, and different herbs and that kind of thing. And so it took us a minute to be able to re-engineer this, literally tested it on hundreds of individuals to be able to prove out the efficacy of it. And so we went from 2000 to 2023 and did that. And then, we were looking to be able to bring that to market. What's the best way to be able to bring that to market? And we thought, you know what, we want to do our own IPO, or, how do we want to get into the capital markets to be able to raise capital and be competitive within the beverage space? And so we came across this little company out of Jupiter, Florida, called Jupiter Wellness. They had a portfolio of wellness products, whether it was hair regrowth or skincare and that kind of a thing. And so we did an asset purchase agreement with them back in July of 23. And it was within a couple of months, really, or actually just weeks, where everybody just kind of realized, this is going to be, let's really just make this more of a beverage and not confuse the consumer with all the other Jupiter Wellness products. And so we re-symboled the company and renamed the company. It was approximately November of 2023. And so we renamed Jupiter Wellness to Safety Shot, and then we re-symboled the company from JUPW to SHOT to what it is today. And then we launched ultimately that product about 15 months ago in January of 2024.
All right, I got a lot of follow-up questions. First and foremost, so you seem like a go type of person from the point of view of you're able to scale your one business up to 400, the next one up to 600 pretty quickly. How were you able to handle mentally sitting around for like 3 years waiting for tests to go through and waiting for like bureaucrats to accept you?
Yeah, that was one of the hardest parts, and challenging at the same time, because it was when I can't even emphasize enough how difficult this drink has been to engineer for it to be able to do what it was. And so it was a lot of things that were beyond our control, or my direct control, because we had to go out and enlist some incredible experts within the field to be able to help re-engineer this. But it was a lessons in patience, but a lot of curbed up enthusiasm and excitement to be able to hit the ground running when we did have the opportunity, and kind of knew what we had before us, and wanted to be patient and wanted to do it right. And don't get me wrong, there's always going to be R&D, research and development, that needs to be, and will continue to be on the drink to be able to make it, refine it. If we can take it from 30 ingredients down to 29 to 28 to 27, whatever it may be, also to increase the efficacy of it. But we'll always be working on it. But at the time, we felt it was time to bring it to market at that time.
And then bring me into the decision with looking for a business to acquire to go public as a way to kind of like raise money. What did you learn from raising your 4 rounds of venture capital in the past that made you think, hey, I don't really want to go with venture this time. I just want to go directly to the public markets. Did you just have experience as a publicly traded company, so that didn't intimidate you as much? Did you have relationship with bankers, so that just made more sense than going with VCs? Or kind of walk me through that.
John, my partner, is he's been in the capital markets for the past decade or so. So he had a tremendous amount of experience and opinion about it. And of course, I had that experience with LifeLock, going through all of it. And we knew a lot of what we didn't want to do. We didn't want to necessarily bootstrap it. We knew we didn't necessarily want to, go the VC route if we didn't have to, with the commitments that it takes when you take down that kind of capital. We talked about doing an IPO ourselves, and that was something that we were like, we can do that, but that was going to add another 6 months to the process, and we had already been waiting, to your point, 3 years to kind of do that. And in hindsight, we could have done that, and that would have been a great path as well, but we had this opportunity before us with Jupiter, and it just made sense at that time. We're like, listen, if we're going to do it, let's do it and step on the gas.
Did you care at all that like Jupiter was already selling like health products, or was it just you're just looking for like a publicly traded company that would sell based on just the assets on the balance sheet?
Maybe a little bit of both. Like, we came in there thinking, they've got some really interesting products that we could also go to market with, and whole separate side store. We are spinning out that company and then spinning out those assets and here in the next couple of weeks. So they were still great products, but we also realized, with Safety Shot, listen, we've got something here that's incredibly unique that could have rocket ship growth that has worldwide appeal. You know, the United States isn't the only country in the world that drinks or likes to, and thought, if we're going to do this, let's really have laser sniper type approach, and that's why we made the shift and made the pivot, and all of it within management and the board really saw that as well, and it was a really easy decision and seamless decision to make.
It may be a bit redundant, but I'm kind of trying to chronologically step our way to, in your own words, what is Safety Shot? Like, what is the actual product? Do people just buy it in the store? They buy it on Amazon? Tell me exactly like what the customer it is.
Yeah, so Safety Shot is the first beverage that's out there that is both patented and clinically proven to reduce the effects of alcohol and lower your blood alcohol content. So it's designed to really lower your BAC and help sober you up and eliminate the negative effects of alcohol, whether it's that same day or the next morning.
And as you were kind of switching from a like FDA-based B2B product that you're thinking maybe you're going to sell to hospitals to a more direct-to-consumer product, what was the biggest challenges in there? Was it just finding ingredients that were generally accepted as safe that mimicked what your current formula did? Was it just figuring out the right amounts, but you knew which ingredients to use, you just didn't know in what amounts? Or kind of what was the challenge there in like switching from a kind of almost prescription-based thing to a over-the-counter?
Really, it was, greater minds than myself. I'll be the first one to raise my hand and admit to the scientists that we were working with. It was really about trying to be able to find parallel ingredients of something that would work in the natural world, that would work in the pharmaceutical world. It was a lot of trial and error. I mean, a lot, like hundreds of thousands of trials to be able to get to that point, which we finally were able to get to. And there were several reiterations of it. When we launched in January of 24, we launched actually the beverage in a 12-ounce can. And it launched under the name of Safety Shot. And then we were getting kind of a lot of feedback, both from retailers and consumers, that 12 ounces is a lot to potentially be able to consume. And then we were also getting some interesting feedback from the larger retailers out there of the world. They're all household names that you would know if I mentioned them, about the name of them, the Safety Shot. They were like, we don't want it to necessarily infer something that it's not, because we don't necessarily want to incur any type of liability, which is interesting because they're also the ones selling alcohol, potentially lead to something like that. But we didn't want any pushback. We're like, you know what? We're at the infancy of our organization. We hear you. And so shortly thereafter, I think it was in the fall of last year, we reformatted Shot and renamed it. So we reformatted it from a 12-ounce format to this 4-ounce format. So it's a lot easier for consumers to consume. It also solves some other problems. We didn't necessarily need to be within the cold space, within brick and mortar with retail, where you would find energy or sodas or that type of a thing. This can also live on the shelf or point of sale. And then we renamed it Sure Shot to be a little bit more with pop culture and for those reasons, and we came out with some other flavors. And then shortly thereafter, a few months ago, we also came up with Sure Shot in a stick pack format. So similar to like a liquid IV, where it's more of a on the go type of format. If somebody wants to put it in their pocket, or we sold at point of sale and that kind of thing. So that was kind of the genesis behind the name, and then also going from the 12-ounce to the 4.
No, my day job is in e-commerce, and I just can imagine how much cheaper it is to ship the powder than the liquid.
Exactly, and that's the 4-ounce versus the 12-ounce, and that was part of our go-to-market strategy. Is as a brand, you really want to go win online, and that's where you can build the brand awareness. And so it was really easy to make those decisions as well. The way that we're looking at the business is we want to own and go dominate online, whether that's on our own SureShot.com website or Amazon.com or Walmart.com or other e-retailers, and build the brand there, and then also build within brick and mortar, within traditional retail, and then as well as within the DSD model with restaurants, bars, nightclubs, hotels, casinos, and be where those drinking occasions are, so that people have this. And so while it is a beverage that will lower somebody's what alcohol content. It really is much more than that. This is also a remedy to, negate the negative effects of alcohol after you've consumed it. So if this wasn't the last drink of your evening, this could also be the first drink of the morning as well to eliminate any of those negative effects.
That was going to be kind of my next question is in a perfect lab environment, how do I consume a glass and swig down some Sure Shot? Do I drink it before I start drinking alcohol? Do I drink it midway through? Do I take some before I go to bed? Do I do it first thing in the morning? What do you recommend?
That's a good question. It really is, because what we have found is what we thought it was, it is, but it's also different. And what I mean by that is, we really thought this would be the last drink of the evening, right? This would be your last call, so to speak. But we're also finding with consumers, and this we find more with the younger type consumers, like the college kids, the 21 to 25 or 6-year-olds, they'll actually consume this in the middle of their experience, similar like a Red Bull and vodka, because for that, they don't get as intoxicated. So it keeps their night going a little bit longer. And then for those of us who didn't, think about it and have it as the last call of the evening, it could be the first drink of the morning, if you have a headache or have some of those negative effects of alcohol.
That's kind of my first thought is like some college kid wakes up Saturday morning, but then has to tailgate for the football game and get some Sure Shot in you, get some electrolytes, get something in you. You got to pep up and get ready for the next day kind of thing.
It's true. And our demographic is far and wide, right? It's really anybody that we see who consumes alcohol. It is that younger demographic because it's got that, when we tell people about this, there's two main responses that we get. The first response that we get is people's eyebrows raised. They're like, really? I didn't even know there was a product like that. Like, that's amazing. And then the second is we want to try it. And what we find is, trying in Sure Shot is believing in Sure Shot. We find that when people try it, they're like, yeah, this really works. And then we see it all the way to the gray hairs, like myself, right? It's the professionals who consume alcohol, but the effects of alcohol are different for us than maybe people your age, and we don't recover quite as well, and we want to be able to perform better the next day, whether it's in the boardroom or on the golf course, as well as to, the moms of the world want to enjoy a nice wine night with their girlfriends and be able to function and be able to tend to the family and the kids that evening or the next day as well. So it's really far and wide on the demographic side.
I got a fantasy football draft coming up with all the guys, and usually there's a Costco run involved, and usually there's a bunch of like liquid IV that's bought along the way. And so, no, it's a perfect kind of thing to be like, hey, we're going to be going after it, golfing this and that. Might as well stay hydrated and all that along the way. So I totally get it. So looking forward and breaking down kind of just where you want to spend your resources, is it like 70% on your direct consumer website and selling online, 30% focusing on brick and mortars? Is it the other way around, or kind of where do you spend your energy trying to get distribution?
So the way that we're building the business today is a couple of different folds. So you're absolutely right. We're taking a look at the business, and we really want to go online to be able to build that brand and consumer awareness. It's easy. I can't say it's easy to do. That's always a daunting task. But I would say 75 to 80% of our business will be online, and then that 25% will really be strategic within retail and restaurants, bars, and that kind of a thing. For the first at least 12 to 18 months moving forward, to be able to go win those, you want to be able to go dominate on Amazon. You want to be able to go dominate on Facebook, TikTok, all of the platforms that everybody is on, Instagram. And part of the reason why we're also, being very strategic about it is we're also in the process of acquiring a company, an energy drink company that will be finalized within the next 45 to 90 days, Yerba. Yerba is a clean energy drink. It's got 8 ingredients in it, ingredients that you can all name, you can spell them, you know exactly what they are. They've been around for the last 5 or 6 years. They've got, they're about 8,900 different retail locations across the United States. And so we're stronger together than we are apart. And so we'll be able to kind of plug and play within some of their distribution channels and partners, whether it's retail or convenience store or others. And so that'll be the other side of the business that we're driving as well moving forward.
Yeah, I could see paradoxically like you getting your product in, say, a Target or Walmart would make it so that almost your product would get kind of like lost in the sea of all the different SKUs. Where if you're just like one of the few SKUs they have in like a little bodegas you walk by in like Las Vegas, like you would stand out like a sore thumb. People would grab it, be like, "Oh, what's this?" kind of thing. And so like it's people definitely just need to see it to and make it stand out kind of in these specific situations like that. Or I'm thinking like an airport convenience place and like all these kind of smaller convenience stores they have inside hotels and such.
They need to be educated about it. That's the unique thing about, the challenge that we have, which was similar to LifeLock, right? It was a unicorn within the space where you had to educate the consumer. So within beverage or CPG, it's a lot easier for a consumer to switch from a product that they're already buying, right? So for example, it would be easier for a consumer to switch from buying a Red Bull, for example, to a Yerba. Whereas if you have something that's new in the marketplace, you've got a nanosecond to be able to grab a consumer's attention if it's on shelf somewhere. And so that's why it's important for us to go win online and be able to build the brand with various influencers and media buys and that kind of thing. So when they do see it on the shelf somewhere, like, oh yeah, I've seen Sure Shot. I want to be able to try that, And so there's definitely an evolution. You want to be careful what you want. What you wish for within retail at the same time too. It's one thing to get there. It's another thing to have the velocity to be able to stay there and be able to continue moving on. So that's why we also want to be very strategic about our growth to make sure that when we are in those locations, we're there to stay.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap up here, what's the 5-year plan of, is it continually acquiring new brands and just getting more and more distribution? Is it coming out with different sizes, different flavors, different formulations, or kind of where do you see yourselves in like the year 2030?
Everything you just mentioned. The first and foremost thing is we're to continue to refine our product. We just compiled and had our clinical trials done. That was something that was very important to us is that we wanted to be able to validate this with science. So that one, the consumer would have the confidence that they're consuming something that has the efficacy of it. And as well from the investment world, the investors of the world in the capital market. So they'd be investing in a company for the very same reason. So, we'll continue to refine our clinical trials and refine the product and come out with additional flavors and the efficacy of it. We are very much, we see ourselves as a wellness brand and you kind of see that with the recent acquisition that we're going through with Yerba as well, with it being clean, natural energy. And I think you'll see that with some, other products that we're coming out with in the future that we're already doing research and development on. You may see us do some things, in the nootropic space with more mental clarity and things like that, or the sleep space to be able to make you fall asleep faster, cleaner, better. And we'll either, continue to grow our business, organically internally by our own R&D or through M&A, similar to what you saw or seen with your big transaction.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If my audience wants to learn anything more about Safety Shot, Sure Shot, where should I send them?
Yeah, so Sure Shot is the brand. So just sureshot.com if they want to be able to take a look and we'll talk about the science. We'll talk about our journey. Talk about how the product works. And if they're inclined to try it, they can order it from there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And for all of you still listening, please remember to subscribe and review. Thanks.
Thanks, Will.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not provide financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or any offer to buy or sell any securities or to make any investment. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement, therefore, by NanoCap Podcast or its affiliates. The NanoCap Podcast express disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information